Everyone, I'm going to call the meeting together for the Board of Water and Wastewater Commissioners at the small hearing room at Town Hall at 732 Main Street, Harwich, on Friday, May 10th, 2024 at 1 p.m. Basically, we're just here today to discuss the CWMP point of contact. The discussion with the board that we've been having as to when the calls come in, and it's about the wastewater department, people who are online, who are actively using the system. You know, John is answering those calls. I'm assuming you're answering those calls.
I did. I actually had one 2 days ago.
Okay.
As well. Yeah.
So the concern is, especially with the admin staff, is they've been able to take those calls, field those calls to Dan, or I don't even know who else they would call. It would just
That's
be,
it,
it
only
would be
Dan.
Dan. So now, who are we contacting? Are we forwarding it to Town Hall? Are we forwarding it to, do we have someone in place at GHD?
So, Joe, do you want to speak to that, please?
I have no idea where the cameras are, so I'll look at you all.
Okay.
Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, board. First, I would say that in the absence of the wastewater superintendent, anything on operations, as you've said, would go to the assistant wastewater superintendent. But if the assistant wastewater superintendent needs any assistance on operations, town government side stands ready to assist. With regard to any questions on construction, the phases, either past, present, or future, I think those would be appropriate to come to me as town administrator on behalf of the select board, because that's construction as we have it laid out in the charter. Additionally, I am executing an on-call service agreement with GHD specifically on wastewater questions. So GHD could answer theoretically any questions related to wastewater.
Okay.
I'm looking for them to be the primary point of contact for me as the questions come in. We've been, when I say we, I mean the administration staff at Town Hall have been collecting messages. There's a number of folks that I'm going to be reaching out to anyway on the construction phase 3. The easement notices went out, as I'm sure you're aware of. There's still the pump station conversations to have with any property owners that are understood to be receiving an award for damages. So all that's taking place post-town meeting. My only request through you to staff would be, and this is a standard that I use throughout our town government, we just ask that there not be calls dropped or dumped, so to speak. So if somebody were to call the water department about a wastewater construction type or the topic in hand, certainly send it over to administration. Danielle Freiner, Natasha Lyon are always there to answer. If they're not, it goes to voicemail. But we would just ask that there's a handover on the call. In other words, hey, so-and-so is on the line, going to pass it over.
So our phone system's capable of doing that?
The staff are capable of transferring calls.
So if a phone call comes into the water department.
So we're talking live phone call, correct?
Yep. Tracy answers the phone.
Yep.
Has a question about CWMP, she can forward that call right to Town Hall.
Correct. What I'm asking is she put the call on hold.
Yep.
Tell them that she's going to transfer in a minute. Call over to the administration department. So-and-so's on the line. They have a question.
Okay.
I'm going to pass them through.
John?
On that note, this week I actually got a phone call from somebody to my cell phone, which was given by Wellesley. She thought it was a maintenance, sewer maintenance issue at first. But when I spoke with the resident of Harwich, it was a CWMP question.
Yep.
It was basically, she lives on the property of Washburn and Church Street, and was under the impression that there was going to be a pump station being installed there, and that there was going to be an easement of land being taken and things like that. So when I called her and spoke with her, and this was what was the questions that were being asked, I immediately said, I apologized, but these are questions that I don't have the information to be able to answer. And I directed her to the town administrator. I said, your best bet would be to call the town administrator. So you don't always have that option to just keep them on hold, direct them through the phone system, and pass.
No, and I would agree with that, but the method you went through is proper. Because for me, so for anyone watching this meeting, you've got the Board of Water Wastewater Commissioners responsible for water and wastewater operations. You have Select Board representing the construction side of sewer construction, wastewater construction. I think what combines all of us and anyone calling is everybody here is understood by the real world, so to speak, as the town of Harwich. And so as town administrator, that's my message, that anyone they're talking to the town of Harwich. However, the best resource on anything to do with comprehensive wastewater management planning generally, construction generally, is me as town administrator in the short term. Part of my discussions with GHD, and I will put out there on the record, GHD offered without initiation to be able to take this on. We're working on additional support, if you will, on here's an 800 number or whatever it may be, meaning communication channels. In speaking about this scenario with the former water wastewater superintendent, I had asked, who do you recommend? And his response was, 6 years ago when we were doing this, it was, well, I'll say the name, but CDM Smith, our prior engineering firm on construction. So that's why when I heard that and GHD offered, I would say that we can continue relying upon the construction engineer. But again, as always, town of Harwich, phone calls should, if not start with me, should certainly end with me as administrator.
All right, Noreen?
Okay, so I agree with almost everything you said, Joe. That's a lot for me. So I just want to make a couple of clarifications before I make some suggestions. For instance, you made the statement easements went out, we would probably know that. Just so people start to understand, we would have no knowledge of that. That's nothing to do with our operations, the easements for future areas or anything like that. So just so you start to remember that that's, totally out of our territory. I just had a problem with one thing that you said about John in terms of that the assistant, would follow the duties of the superintendent, which of course is true, except for we must remember that in not one single word of the superintendent's job description says implementation. So yes, John would be doing the duties listed in the superintendent's job description, which, well, fortunately or unfortunately, have, only cover the implemented phases. Absolutely not one word applies to CWMP and all that stuff that Dan took on. So at any rate, I've mapped out some ideas I had.
May I just ask?
Sure.
I believe my reference was to operations.
Oh, okay, I wasn't clear. That's fine, good.
Okay, thank you.
Good,
Yep.
all the better. So this is for everybody. If you could follow me along, I'm going to have to ask John to get up and spread those around. So totally agree on what you described as like the phone structure. And I'm really happy to hear, even though I hadn't figured that into this plan, about the handoff. Because having worked in the utility industry for 10 years, the most important part of the day was the end of the day. You didn't want a staff of 25 people who deal with phones to just dump them on a dispatcher. You had to, that was my strongest rule as manager, was that you owned that call till you personally handed it to somebody else. And that's exactly what Joe, sort of suggested. But I'd like to put some more meat on the bones that you described, Joe, in this manner. I was so impressed with the information session that you ran, Joe, in March. That Phase 3 audience, just really astounded me. And this was long before we knew anything about Dan leaving or anything like that. They were so educated. I could not believe the level of questions. Obviously, those people learned from the Phase 2 people. We'll always have people that come back from Timbuktu and say they don't know anything about it, but overall, I think, it's a real benefit what we went through in Phase 2. So I really feel that phone prompts are a part of the picture, because this is an intelligent audience. They will, as I call it, self-select as things go on. You can't tell an unknown caller to wait till you get to a live person so they can hand you off. The caller's going to do whatever they want to do. So what this is, the first page, this is just a map of if you call the water department number, these are the 4 prompts you get. On the second page, this is the town hall. If you call the main number, you get these 7 prompts that are on the left, and the 9 prompts that are on the right actually come out of the town hall box. So if you choose one, then you get these 9. Just for general information, the third page is what's really our Bible, and that's a section from the executive summary. It just outlines, it makes it crystal clear what we cover and what the Board of Selectmen wanted to cover back then in 2016. Unfortunately, it ends with the sentence, "The town continues to work out the details to formalize the structure." Well, we never did. This is the conversation we should have been having in 2017, but life went on, we had a method, and so now it's 2017. So I would like consideration, and the administration staff would like consideration of adding a prompt to both phone systems, not necessarily with this exact language, but for the people who do call and self-select and use the prompts.
Yes.
So they can go, so that won't have a handoff, but that's people calling.
If I may, the prompt may already exist. I think what may have happened in the migration to the phone system is that it was not carried over, meaning we've had in the past a dedicated number.
Right.
And I think you remember
Charlie.
Representative from, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm working with appropriate staff to uncover that.
Right.
Because as you may know, the board's going to award contracts Monday evening, May 13th.
That I
So
know.
we need to have that in place as well. So we staff are already mindful of that and working on having those prompts.
Right.
As soon as we have that identified, I'll share it broadly with staff, everybody, most especially over at Chatham Road, so that they can redirect to that. But I'll also be talking about it at select board meetings, et cetera.
Okay, couple of things there. So fine to get the number, but can we actually can we get some technical assistance with adding a phone prompt to our phone
Yes.
menu?
Yep. Yeah, we
Okay.
have that capability through the county
Okay,
on our Teams applications.
all right, so, all right.
So
we
just for
can-
clarification, though, we'd really be 2 places, it'd be your phone
Right.
system and ours.
Right.
So,
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
just
Yep.
want
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah.
Right.
And one to go up there, and if they stop and speak to a live person, I love the handoff system,
Right.
we can do that.
And the
Yep.
only thing, just before I forget to say this, is that if the call comes in to, to somebody live at
Right.
the water department, just because we all know them, you get handed off sometimes, even though you've said,
Right,
is just to get that person's name and number,
Right.
just in case,
Right.
right? 'Cause
yeah. I
that's
mean,
the worst.
the staff is, they're so wonderful with the
Right, oh,
residents,
yeah.
and they,
I'm just
they
saying, like,
want to
sometimes
do
it's just,
everything
like,
too.
trying to make
Yeah.
that,
One point I wanted to mention, though, is, as far as I'm concerned, these situations with the CWMP and the construction, Phase 3, et cetera, don't involve Steve or John. Their job, they
Correct.
certainly can speak for themselves,
Yeah.
but
Correct.
their jobs are to fill in for the Dan job that was in black and white, not for the Dan job that was all-encompassing all over the town. So,
Sure.
so when we're talking about calls, handoffs, anything like that, they aren't involved when it's CWMP or anything like that. John knows if it's Phase 2, he's on the learning curve, he's new, but he would take those and handle those. And certainly Steve knows any we're not here to talk about water questions.
Yeah, why
But
are
in-
you here?
But in terms of the CW,
I'm happy
Because
to
you
see
didn't want to have lunch.
I'm happy to see you.
in terms of the CWMP or anything like that, for instance, let's say that Tracy gets a call, and she's got a map over a thing that tells her, you give her her address, she knows, what phase you're in and everything else. So let's say it's a CWMP question. Part of the reason I asked for this meeting was good for us to be in one room, because I had been hearing that maybe she would get some advice from John and Steve, but I'm saying that won't happen. Tracy will either handle the call between her and John, if it's phase 2, or she will be handing it off. There is no reason to involve these two gentlemen in anything that has to do with phase 3.
Joe, sorry.
Sorry, no,
Sorry,
sorry.
I don't know. Joe,
Agreed,
Okay,
100%, and not before
Wow.
today. Well, if I may
yeah,
finish my sentence, thank you.
Yes, please.
There's never been a disagreement on that.
okay,
I think it may be helpful, and when I say that, I don't mean necessarily for all of us here, but for the larger audience, AKA the real world. And the way that the superintendent and I would talk about it is, I've been looking at things in terms of operations versus construction.
yeah,
And so far, so good, is that right? Meaning, if there's something that's operationally underway, water and/or wastewater, it's Chatham Road, these
Right.
folks, and everybody else. If it's construction, it remains with the town, 732 Main Street, town administrator on behalf of select board.
right,
And the only reason I say that is in talking to folks out in the world, they're not aware of a CWMP. I look at the board members, I shouldn't even be saying the acronym.
right.
Right, yeah.
So I think if we all start today and we can push forward, questions on operations for water and wastewater, Chatham Road, questions on construction, 732 Main Street.
construction for wastewater, because we do have a big water project coming up, which would be directed to Chatham
Yes,
Road.
so I agree. However, there have been questions about construction on water on articles. And so funding, and that's why I've been taking those.
Okay.
So just as a very quick shorthand, operations, no question, construction, start with. Because we'll do the same thing on our end. If it becomes a construction question and it's water related, I'll make sure my team gets that information back over to you folks. And again, in the same manner that we'd ask you to do on construction.
Noreen,
Okay, too many things went by there. You really shouldn't be taking calls about construction on water. That's this board's purview, but, we don't have to beat that to death today. But we do our borrowing, we plan our borrowing, we do the construction, we plan the projects. Construction on water projects is our domain, Okay, so just to be clear about that's why we're elected, that's why we're hired.
So were you folks doing this state revolving fund process?
Yeah. Well,
Perfect.
I'm not exactly, Dan submitted all the things and everything else, but it's that's in the job description. I mean, that's us.
No, I only asked because the interim treasurer and I were on the the state revolving fund call last week.
Right,
And it was about the Route 28 project.
yeah,
So I can stand down on that stuff. I took that as the town of Harwich,
right.
town meeting articles and
Well,
others, but I
I
have
don't
no
want-
problem deferring.
I don't want to digress too much. I mean, right now, we're without a superintendent anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so, right now, we don't have anybody to plug into that hole. But, we can.
But so on that though, it would be important to be monitoring that stuff then, right, till we fill that
Right.
position, because
Yeah.
if you weren't, was there anyone else on that call, just so we know?
To my knowledge, just the interim treasurer collector.
Yeah, so
Right.
we don't wanna miss,
so seeing that we don't have a superintendent, would that fall on Sandy to be on that call?
If it's about bonding and borrowing, we're really going off the rails here. No, it wouldn't be Sandy. It's a complicated
Yeah, we
area.
don't have to go down
Yeah,
that road.
I mean,
if we don't want.
it's only that you mention that, so stay on the rails, Joe.
Sure. I'd like to just say operation and construction generally.
Okay, so that's where I was starting to go. The word operations kind of bothers me the way it bothered Gary, because there are so many different kinds of operations going on. You know, at some point, and I've been pushing it off, as we all know, that whole section of wastewater has to be rewritten in the charter. And it's nothing I want to do right away, because I think we should figure out who we are before we try to, you know, put it down in writing. But quite honestly, I'm starting to see us going more in the direction of a Harwich Water and Sewer Department. You know, I fought that word years ago. Larry Ballantyne and I fought it. Whenever anybody would say sewer, we'd yell out wastewater, because we wanted wastewater to cover, you know, attenuation, IH, you know, everything. Well, now that, you know, you try things, let's face it, we're really figuring out. So I kind of like construction and sewering, you know, but, you know, whatever, yeah, however that works out. But, all right, so I got derailed myself there. But at any rate, the other thing we would need, and then it'll come back to me, would be an email thing. Some people email questions to the department, and so when you have, you know, time to think about it, we would, you know, need that to forward things on of that nature. I don't think an email has to be handed off, but you know what I mean. The other, just a couple of things I was going to throw in very quickly is I would love to try some of these things and then have another meeting in 4 or 5 weeks with the same people, because no matter what we plan, there's going to be what I call bleed through in utilities. Customers will get through different back doors, they'll wind up on Steve's phone, they'll wind up, you know, everywhere, no matter what the plan is. So maybe in about 5 weeks, we can see how things are going. And the other thought I had was that I heard you make the announcement about the new website coming out, and that might be an opportunity by then, 6 weeks from now, to advertise this more, because again, that Phase 3 audience is educated,
Right.
and once we start getting out there, you know, I wouldn't want to put anything right away till we know what we're doing, but, you know, once we've had a little experience and,
Yeah. No, I mean, I was gonna mention the whole website thing anyway, so that it's very clear. You know, we already have a section, but that we should make a subsection so that it's, you know, Phase 3 or whatever we wanna call it, and throw out the areas, so that you could have all that relative
Right.
info in that section. And the other thing, in terms of the reports, in terms of the phone calls coming in, I think it would be helpful if on both ends, if water is taking down some calls, they just like keep a little log,
yeah.
so that every week they can kind of.
I was
that
thinking about the
office
same
can
thing,
talk to
yeah.
this office, and then everybody can know if somebody fell through the cracks. And that means that we would have some data to look at
Right.
in the next meeting we had.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a
No,
regroup
I
is
think
good
that's a
after
good
month
idea,
or so,
yeah. Okay,
Noreen, good?
I think so.
Um,
Could I ask, John, you're the most central at this point, how do you feel about what's been said?
I feel comfortable with it, yeah.
Okay,
I've already had 2 occasions now where Joe's, you know, as soon as I started, Joe said, any, you know, questions, you send them to me,
Yeah.
here's my card. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but like, it's right away, it's happened.
Yeah,
I mean,
if I may, what he just revealed is the Go See Joe card, as we've talked about.
But,
Yep.
no, we've had to deal with it with a resident already.
Yep.
We're actually continually dealing with this resident. And then it just happened again this week with another resident.
Is this the resident on Bay Road?
The Bay Road resident, correct.
This is the third time?
This is the second time that
Second
they've
time.
had an issue.
All right, so do you guys know about the Bay Road?
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually
all right.
saw that and asked.
Okay.
that.
So that's a
And
that's a
we
problem.
have a temporary solution in plan, Steve and I do, to make sure that they don't get backed up again. But there is a huge issue that needs to be dealt with in order to correct the situation.
Yep.
Is there a plan?
That's where I play the
Go
for Joe.
Go Joe.
Yeah, exactly, yes. As soon as administration was made aware of that, Mark Drainville, love that name. In fact, the resident didn't believe that was actually the contact.
I didn't either.
Mark Drainville of GHD, and I don't, did he connect with
He
you?
has reached out, yeah.
He, at my direction, Mark spoke with John, came back to me and said, here's the solution recommended, we endorse it, and we're moving forward on it. Meaning, they've already connected with your team, our team, if I can say it that way, and they're actively working on trying to figure out what the solutions or solutions may be for Bay Road. But that's an example of it was an immediate act. And we have some great material already coming to us from GHD.
All right.
Another little thing on those things is, you know, when we had the flurry of starting phase 2 and then, you know, underestimated bids, COVID, you know, all kinds of things kicked in. But at the time, we had a lot of flyers. We were giving out flyers all the time, and most of those are pretty dated right now. But the one that comes immediately to mind, and I'm not sure, when I have an opportunity to talk to Dan, I'll ask him if he already created one. But if not, but I really think the first one we need is on grinder pumps, since they seem to be the topic of the day. So I'll find out if Dan had already created one. If he hadn't, maybe we can get Mark to do a one-pager with 10 points that, and, you know, start off by telling them that the town is gonna pay. We still have things we don't know, like the maintenance, the liability, the stuff like that, but the general points, you know.
Joe?
Mark Drainville and I have been meeting weekly in person for the last 3 months. Mark has offered to do that through the next 6 months. I suggested, given that he's off Cape, we might want to do it remote.
Yeah.
For his benefit, but he identified that issue to me a month ago.
Right.
So we're already working on the grinder pump policy that the board's gonna have to do, the program that may relate it to.
Right.
But all of that's in play.
And keep in mind, and we can have a separate session sometime if we need to, there's a lot of information, and a lot of it was good, that Mark wasn't on board for and would not be aware of, but about this, for the phase 3 people, the steps to connect and everything else. I can reinvent all of those things, and they were good. It's just that they, you know, nobody's needed them much for the last couple of years, so.
Does anybody have anything else?
How,
Mr.
yeah.
McCaskill?
Where else does the mapping exist besides over Tracy's head?
The town website.
Yeah.
It's on the website.
Interactive.
Yeah, it's great.
It is really
Yeah, the
amazing.
phase 2 one not only tells people, you know, their address and everything else, it gives a history of their water bills, which would help them figure out their sewer bills. The phase 3 one, it gives them the ability to pull up their septic tank and everything, and it's just getting people to use it, but it's fabulous.
I'll just comment that I think it's great that we all get on the same page.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
But I do think that we need to all remember who we work for.
Yeah,
And that's the taxpayers and the residents.
That's right.
And we can get into this, I'm gonna do this and you're gonna do this and stay on the rails as much as we want. The reality is, that's not a reality. They recognize us because we're elected. They
That's right.
recognize us because of our last names, and they recognize the employees that we're paying in the town administrator. So, as much of a fine line as we wanna draw, we gotta understand that we serve the taxpayers, and we gotta do everything we can do to help them. And it doesn't matter and who's getting asked at the time. The direction and the hand-holding through that process is extremely important.
that's right,
And, you know, you guys are gonna be on the front line whether you like it or not,
yeah.
through your staff, because that's where they're gonna call first. We can have the Chronicle write it up, we can talk about it in public meetings. 20% of the people are gonna hear that, the other 80% are still gonna react the way that they're normally going to react. So there will be a fairly high volume, but my message simply is, remember who we work for. My only other comments, Julie, really don't have anything to do with the Board of Water Wastewater Commissioner. It's the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen on the reality of how many calls Joe can take and what he can do.
Right, which is,
And I understand GHD and their commitment to this. I'm not convinced that's the right solution. And I know in both contracts, we have the ability to pull money for an OPM of our own. I presented this to you a little bit ago, that we need to have that global conversation about what level do we want an OPM for the Board of Selectmen, and what level do we want the town administrator to be involved in?
Yeah.
Don't need that now,
No,
but that's
I
a
agree,
conversation
though.
for
That's
us.
something that when this whole project started to come online, I think it was me and Ed at one point wanted to put money aside in the budget for that purpose, because I think it's critical. You need somebody to sort of be the middleman.
And then
So I think it's
lastly,
great.
and this is probably directed to Joe, it's the other task that Dan did that was a fairly monumental task was the information that he provided to Pleasant Bay Alliance
Right.
and that report. So that's something that I think we need to have that conversation on who's going to do the Pleasant Bay Alliance conversations with going forward, because it's not going to be the water wastewater superintendent.
Joe?
And there may be a few other items as well, as Pleasant Bay is the first one, but I've been in a brief conversation yesterday. Dan mentioned he was finishing up a DEP. I mean, there are things being done that we don't even know have to be done, you know, so
Right, and that all
we're
needs
going
to
to
get
try to
covered.
define them, and nobody's trying to dump them
Right.
overnight or anything like that. We're just trying to figure it out.
No, and actually, one other point, and I know you can share this all anyway, Joe, but like, a lot of times people, and I know this just from my stuff, is that, you know, a lot of times people think it's health
Yeah,
that does this.
that's right.
They go to health, so we should make sure health understands all the info and
Yeah.
how to get it to the appropriate people, so.
Joe, you had a comment?
The on-call services agreement with GHD on the wastewater side presently includes them working with me with Pleasant Bay Alliance so that we don't lose any coverage. I know in the past, there was a member of the select board as well as the town's construction engineer, you know, back in phase 2 that did that, but we shouldn't be losing any coverage on that because I believe I've already covered that.
Great.
Yep.
All right, well, I just appreciate everyone being here today, because I think the biggest issue, basically what Michael was saying, is, and I think the reason phase 2 was so successful is because of the communication and someone being there to answer questions and put residents at ease. I mean, to have that is, I think, monumental. We need to keep that going. That's why I think it's so important. With these phone calls, have to get directed to the right people. We can't leave people hanging. And no response and no communication is worse than the call, because now you're like, well, what's going on? How come they're not calling me back? So I think it's just really important that we just do what we can, and this whole phone system, and especially the admin office, the ladies at the water department, passing those phone calls on and getting people's answers. So, does any?
So, well, just a quick one. So I know the water department staff would know who to call, but what is the number to call? I mean, let's say I got a question and I needed to hand it off to somebody. I mean, is there a phone? I mean, is it the general number?
So the short answer is,
Yeah.
you already have it in the document.
Okay.
The 508-430-7513.
Oh, 7513.
Option 2 is administration.
All right.
I'm sorry, 714 or 7, either one of them get to that main menu. That's the town hall menu. So you hear right off the top, I believe 1 is select board, 2 is administration. So we tell everybody to call 508-430-7514, option 2.
Okay.
For now.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely, until the dedicated lines are pushed out.
Yeah. Great. Well,
Alan, do you have anything?
No, I'm good. No?
No, you good?
I just really appreciate the spirit of everybody working together. We know no matter what we plan, it's going to be bleed through, and utility people love residents, so we'll do our best to always take care of them.
All right, I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second?
all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.